Hey everyone, I'm Amanda. 3 years ago, I was living my dream as a physical therapist at the premier Rehabilitation Center in downtown Chicago. My career was flourishing, and my marriage to Matthew Turner, a charming real estate agent, felt like a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as I soon learned, can turn into nightmares. Amanda, you're amazing with the patience, my colleague said one morning as I helped Mr. Rodriguez regain his walking strength. Thanks, I replied, smiling. I love seeing their progress. Little did I know that my own life would soon need rehabilitation. That evening, as I prepared dinner in our modern apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, Matthew dropped another financial bomb. Babe, Mom needs help with some family investments again this month, he said casually. I froze, knife hovering over the cutting board. Matthew, that's the third time this month. What happened to last week's transfer? His charming facade cracked. Don't question my mother's decisions, he snapped. She knows what's best for our future. My brother Mark had warned me about Matthew's controlling behavior. Sis, something's not adding up with their finances, he'd said during our weekly coffee meetup. But I defended Matthew, convinced that love could conquer all. The real wake-up call came when Henry Chen, Matthew's business partner, caught me in the office parking lot. Amanda, we need to talk, he whispered, glancing around nervously. I've noticed some irregularities in Matthew's client accounts. My best friend Mary noticed my distress over lunch. Amanda, you've lost weight. What's really going on? She pressed. Patricia keeps demanding more money every month, I confided. She calls it family support, but won't show any investment returns. That's financial abuse, Mary said firmly. Have you checked your joint accounts lately? I hadn't, but her words sparked something in me. That night, I logged into our banking app, and the truth hit me like a tidal wave. Thousands were missing, transferred to unknown accounts. When I confronted Matthew, his eyes turned cold. You're being ungrateful, he hissed. After everything my mother's done for us? Little did I know, this was only the beginning. The incident on the highway was coming, the night that would change everything. But for now, watching Matthew storm out of our apartment, I felt the first stirrings of strength. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to find out what. Henry's warning echoed in my mind. Amanda, be careful. They're not who you think they are. The next morning, I sat in my office at the Rehabilitation Center, staring at my phone banking app in disbelief. Another $5,000 had vanished from our joint account overnight. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transaction history, dozens of transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Amanda, dear, Patricia's shrill voice startled me through the phone. We need another $110,000 for a promising investment opportunity. Patricia, I need to understand where the previous money went first, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Are you questioning my judgment after everything I've done for this family? Her tone turned icy. Matthew won't be happy about this. That evening, Henry showed up at my office after hours. He closed the door quietly behind him. Amanda, I found something disturbing, he said, his face pale. Matthew has been showing the same property to multiple buyers, collecting deposits from all of them. What are you saying? He's running a scam. And those investments your mother-in-law keeps demanding? They're not real. I've seen the paperwork. I began secretly photographing bank statements and saving incriminating emails. Mark helped me set up hidden cameras in my home office. The footage revealed Matthew sneaking in late at night, rifling through my personal documents. One evening, dragging back from visiting my parents, Matthew suddenly pulled over on a deserted highway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty road. You've been talking to Henry, haven't you? His voice was dangerously quiet. I have a right to know where our money is going. Get out, he snarled, grabbing my arm. Matthew, we're miles from anywhere. I said get out. He shoved me out of the car, threw my purse after me, and sped away, leaving me stranded in the growing darkness. Coyotes howled in the distance as the temperature plummeted, and my phone had no signal. Just as panic began to set in, headlights appeared on the horizon. My heart raced until I recognized Mary's car. She jumped out, running toward me. Amanda, thank goodness, Henry called me. He overheard Matthew's plans at the office. Back at Mary's house, I discovered even more shocking news. My credit cards were maxed out with charges I never made. Matthew had opened accounts in my name. Look at this, Mary pointed to her laptop screen. Multiple complaints against Matthew's real estate dealings flooded a legal forum. Elderly couples had lost their life savings. There's more. Henry texted me later that night. I found documents linking Patricia to properties registered under different names. That night, instead of feeling defeated, something inside me hardened into steel. They thought they could break me, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number that would change everything. Mark, remember that private investigator friend of yours? I need their help. It's time to show Matthew and Patricia what happens when you mess with the wrong woman. The pieces were falling into place, but I had no idea that what I'd discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. The real shock was still to come, a revelation that would shake our entire community to its core. A week later, the private investigator's report landed on my desk with a heavy thud. My hands shook as I flipped through page after page of evidence. Matthew and Patricia hadn't just scammed me. They'd orchestrated a massive real estate fraud scheme targeting vulnerable people across 3 states. Amanda, you need to see this, Mark said, pulling up security footage on his laptop. The video showed Matthew and Patricia at Golden Sunset Retirement Community, sweet-talking elderly residents into investing their life savings in non-existent properties. My phone buzzed. A text from Pamela, Matthew's sister. We need to talk. Not here. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe in 20 minutes. At the cafe, Pamela's face was pale. Amanda, it's worse than you think. Mom's been using your salary to cover her casino losses. She owes dangerous people a lot of money. Just then, Henry rushed in, clutching a manila envelope. I found these in the office safe, fake property deeds, forged signatures, multiple sales of the same properties. They've been doing this for years. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Matthew. Baby, I've been thinking. Let's work this out. I miss you. Can we meet to talk about our joint account? You mean the account you drained? I kept him talking while Mark recorded the call. That was a misunderstanding, he stammered. I can explain everything. But my focus shifted when a familiar voice caught my attention from the next booth. Yes, Mrs. Turner promised us oceanfront property in Arizona. We invested our entire retirement fund, cried Karen Martinez, a former patient of mine. My blood ran cold. They were targeting my own patients. Back at Mark's place, we spread out all the evidence, property documents, bank statements, victim testimonies. Henry had uncovered a network of fake companies all leading back to Matthew and Patricia. Look at this, Mary pointed to her computer screen. They're still collecting deposits for that Highland Park development. The land doesn't even exist. Suddenly, my phone exploded with notifications. Matthew had tried to access my new private account 6 times in the last hour. Then, a text from Pamela. They know you're gathering evidence. Be careful. Mom's talking about fleeing the country. The doorbell rang, and we all froze. Through the security camera, we saw Karen Martinez and 5 other victims standing on the porch, holding papers. We saw your name on some documents, Karen said when we let them in. We want to help expose them. I looked around at the determined faces, my brother, my best friend, Henry, Pamela, and now these brave victims. Matthew and Patricia thought they were untouchable, but they'd never faced a united front like this. My phone buzzed again. An email from the state real estate board. They wanted to meet tomorrow. Ready? Mark asked, gathering the evidence files. I straightened my spine. They picked the wrong woman to scam. The real estate board meeting turned into a full-blown investigation. I watched from the back row as Karen Martinez testified, her voice strong despite her tears. The Turners took everything we had saved for 40 years. Matthew burst through the doors, desperation etched on his face. Amanda, please, we can work this out privately. There's nothing to work out, Matthew. The evidence speaks for itself. Henry stepped forward, laying out document after document, multiple sales of non-existent properties, forged signatures, fake investment schemes. Pamela stood up, trembling but resolute. I have to tell the truth. Mom and Matthew have done this before in other states. They just changed their company names and moved on. The board's decision was unanimous. Matthew's license was permanently revoked, but that was just the beginning. The local news broke the story. Prominent real estate agent and mother in massive fraud scheme. The phones started ringing. More victims came forward. More evidence piled up. Matthew made one last desperate move, showing up at my new apartment. "I've changed, Amanda. I'll pay everything back. Just drop the charges." "Like you paid back the elderly couples you robbed? The families whose homes you stole? Save it for the judge, Matthew." 3 months later, I stood in front of my new rehabilitation center. The sign read Phoenix Recovery, where healing begins. Mary and Mark stood beside me, beaming with pride. The news coverage continued. Matthew and Patricia faced multiple fraud charges, their assets frozen. The fancy house, the luxury cars, all gone. They couldn't even afford decent lawyers. Pamela visited me at the center one day. "They're completely broke," she said. "Mom's facing years in prison, and Matthew? He's working at a fast food joint, trying to pay back his debts. And you?" I asked, smiling. "Starting fresh, helping other fraud victims rebuild their lives, just like you." They thought they could destroy me, but instead, I rose from the ashes stronger than ever, and now I'm helping others do the same. My center flourished, transforming into a haven for survivors of both physical and financial trauma. Mary managed our outreach program, bringing in new patients and spreading hope, while Mark headed up our legal support services, helping countless fraud victims reclaim their lives. 1 year later, I stood at my office window, watching as Matthew shuffled past in his fast food uniform. He looked old, defeated, a shell of the man who once manipulated and betrayed me. Patricia was serving her sentence, her reputation in tatters, while their empire crumbled to dust. "Miss Mitchell," my assistant poked her head in. "The governor's office called. They want you to head the new fraud prevention task force." I smiled, my fingers brushing against the plaque on my wall. "Phoenix Recovery, rising stronger." That's exactly what I did. I rose from their ashes and built something beautiful. The center was packed for our first anniversary celebration. Former patients shared their recovery stories, each tale a testament to resilience and healing. Karen Martinez, the woman who once lost everything to Matthew's schemes, walked across the stage unassisted to thunderous applause. "You did it, Amanda," Mary whispered, pulling me into a tight hug. "You turned their evil into something good." I looked out at the crowd, my brother, my best friend, my patients, my dedicated staff. I felt nothing but peace. Matthew and Patricia thought they could break me, but instead, they made me unbreakable. And that's my story. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best transformations. You just have to stay strong, gather your evidence, and never let toxic people dim your light. If you're facing toxic relationships or financial abuse, don't suffer in silence. There's always a way out, and karma has a way of catching up with those who wrong you. Today, Phoenix Recovery has 3 locations across the state. We've helped hundreds rebuild their lives, both physically and emotionally. Our legal support program, led by Mark, has brought justice to countless fraud victims. Just last week, I received a letter from Patricia, begging for forgiveness from prison. I didn't open it. Some bridges are better left burned. Matthew? He's still working at that fast food place, living in a tiny studio apartment. Occasionally, he watches my success from afar, but he knows better than to approach. As for Pamela, she's become a powerful advocate for fraud prevention, sharing our story at conferences nationwide. Have you ever faced someone who tried to destroy you, only to find their actions led you to a better life? What was your turning point from being a victim to becoming a victor? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else find their strength. Think about it. Would Amanda have built her successful rehabilitation centers if Matthew and Patricia hadn't pushed her to her breaking point? Sometimes, our greatest achievements rise from our darkest moments.